A lot of eyes from a sports perspective are on Washington right now, and specifically the Supreme Court over a decision around gambling on sports. You've been pretty clear to date about what you think about it. Where does it go from here, obviously depending on the decision that comes
Well,
down?
Not to use a betting metaphor, but the odds seem to be out there that the current federal statute, PASPA, will be overturned by the Supreme Court, and that therefore there will be no federal prohibition on sports betting. It won't automatically make it legal. It will mean that it will now be up to states to regulate it as they see fit. But in anticipation of the Supreme Court overturning this law, roughly 20 states are actively considering sports betting legislation right now. So we've engaged in the discussion. As you mentioned, I had taken the position several years ago that I thought we should have a legalized federal framework for sports betting. I never anticipated it would happen this way, that the Supreme Court would be overturning existing law. But I think it's ultimately a positive thing. We know there's an enormous amount of underground sports betting going on, measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars in the United States alone. And our view is both from an integrity standpoint and a regulatory standpoint, and ultimately for states and federal jurisdictions to raise tax, it should be a regulated industry. So we're very much engaged in these discussions state by state right now.
And help me understand sort of the economics of it from a league standpoint, and how are owners thinking about it as this moves forward?
Well, from a league standpoint, we've proposed something in the model legislation, which we're referring to as an integrity fee. In essence, but it could also be viewed as a royalty. It's our view. The NBA, for example, is going to spend roughly $7.5 billion just this season producing our games. And our view is we should be compensated as the intellectual property creators for this content. In addition, we're going to have substantially increased costs around integrity because, the good news is that it will be a regulated, transparent market. But for us, it means that we now will have the ability to regulate things in the ways we haven't historically, but there'll be enormous expense that comes with that regulation. So we think both because our additional expenses, but also not to hide behind it, that just the expenses, we're creating this intellectual property and we should be compensated. But it'll also, for us, benefit in terms of engagement. I don't want to hide from that either. The notion is that, and most bets, we follow it internationally, in Europe especially, where it's a regulated jurisdiction, most bets are relatively small, and so it's not an issue of problem gambling. We have to watch out for that too, but the notion is if you have $5 or $10 on the game, you're that much more engaged in it. And especially, there's all kinds of in-play betting where you're betting on particular quarter scores or whether a player is going to make the 2 free throws. There could be all kinds of combinations of betting.